Hello, I am Gulnara Omar and welcome to my weekly podcast. Please join me and my guests as we dive into wellness, empowerment psychology, health, beauty, and helpful tips on how to create positive change with greater energy and courage. So, let's get inspired to live healthier, more empowered, and fulfilling lives. Hello, dear friends, and welcome to my podcast. And today, I want to talk about a very important topic. This topic is very close to my heart because, first of all, I struggled with perfectionism. And now you know we're going to talk about perfectionism. And second of all, I spent more than a year writing my thesis about perfectionism. Am I perfect enough to be loved? That was the topic. In this podcast, I would like to share my personal experience about perfectionism and how it negatively impacted my life, and also how my clients suffered because they had this condition and they didn't know they had this condition. They actually were proud that they were perfect or they were perfectionists. And I was also proud at some point. And, when you go to work and they ask you, what's your flaw? Oh, my flaw is because I'm such a perfectionist and I like to check everything, every single detail. But in fact, to be a perfectionist is not really a good thing because it doesn't allow us to enjoy life to the fullest, to have fun. Being perfectionist entails having a lot of negative thoughts about yourself. And I had these thoughts. I had a lot of rumination about it. Rumination meaning repetitive thoughts, and they would come to me and they wouldn't leave me. And that negative voice in my head would say, you're not perfect enough. You have to do more. You have to be more. You have to fulfill. You have to please others. You have to, a lot of you have to's. And it was introduced into all areas of my life: friendships, beauty, the way I look, the way I feel, the way I work. And perfectionism can be very dangerous if you don't catch it and start being aware how perfectionism steals happiness from your life. First of all, let me say that perfectionism has different types. That's why I created a course on how to overcome perfectionism, and I will leave the link down below. So if you are interested, you can follow the link and find this course where I talk about real life stories, case studies, and more than 35 symptoms of perfectionism and how to deal with it and what are the best way to overcome and eliminate it from your life and manage it and reduce it if you can't completely eliminate it. Main three types are self-oriented perfectionism, other-oriented perfectionism, and socially prescribed perfectionism. Self-oriented perfectionism is when you have very high standards and you demand them from yourself. You can't let go of lower standards. You hold extremely unrealistic high standards of yourself. Unless you do it perfectly, you cannot approve of yourself. You're very hard on yourself. Second type is other-oriented perfectionism, is when you are very tough, very harsh, and very critical of others unless they're perfect. And of course, people can't be perfect because we are humans and humans are imperfect. So with this type of perfectionism, with other-oriented perfectionism, it is very difficult to build, maintain, keep quality relationships filled with love, acceptance, mutual acceptance, and forgiveness, of course, because perfectionists have very rigid standards and they hold themselves and others up to the standards. And the last type of perfectionism is socially prescribed. And socially prescribed perfectionism is the type of perfectionism where you give excessive meaning and significance to others, your communities, your society, your tribe, your culture, your family, and you give them power with how they can judge you, how they can approve of your actions and behavior and your choices. And you always try to please them. You want to make sure that your reputation is clear and perfect, and you almost walk on eggshells when you are a perfectionist with socially prescribed perfectionism. So some people have only one type. They only harsh with their own actions and how they perform things, and they're all very often they procrastinate. They can't finish things. They can't start things because they're so scared not to deliver things up to their high standards. And with the second type, as I said, they have a lot of fights with their spouses, with their children, with family members, because they like to criticize and point out, you've done this wrong, this could have been done better. And people, of course, don't like it, even though perfectionists can be loving people. Deep inside, they love others, they want the best, but because of their tongue, so to speak, they would say things and they would be so harsh and so critical that would erase everything they've done before, all the display of love they've shown in the past. Just with these critical words, they can hurt others greatly. And as I said, with the last one, socially prescribed, it's usually with the family members. Let's say you married someone who has socially prescribed perfectionism. And I personally had that situation in my marriage where both my ex-husband and I, we had perfectionism. And by the way, perfectionism has the effect from nature and nurture, meaning nature is when you were born with some predisposition. It does have some elements of hereditary, just like you look like your father with your eyes or eyebrows, you can also inherit certain perfectionistic qualities and tendencies. And nurture is upbringing. If you see your parents being perfect or trying to be perfect and always making sure they look at their best and behave at their best in front of others, you start copying and mimicking this behavior because as a child you think this is the best behavior, and you look at your parents as the best role models and the best examples before you grow up and know that no, they're not perfect, because they have their own traumas. And because perfectionists have such high standards of performance, and they feel and think that unless they are perfect, they cannot be loved, they cannot be accepted. And the root cause is usually a certain type of parenting where parents who are themselves traumatized and probably grew up believing that they needed to be perfect, they raise their kids in the same manner. And they are very harsh with words with their children, and they shame them a lot. And shame is one of the main, I would say, dominant causes of perfectionism. And the difference between shame and guilt is that guilt is about what you've done wrong, and shame is about what's wrong with you. So shame is aimed at your core of who you are. And unless you learn how to remove shame and separate yourself from shame and understand that you are perfect with all of your imperfections, that you are a wonderful human being, and you don't need to please everyone, and you don't need to be someone to be accepted, that it's your birthright to be loved and to be respected, it's very difficult to build quality life. And this shame can come in form of your inner voices, and you need to learn how to recognize whose voice is it. Is it your mother's voice who said, you'll never amount to anything if you don't do that? Or your father's voice who said, well, you disappointed me because you didn't make this soccer game, because you didn't make to finals, or all of those critical, harsh words. And from caregivers, the teachers, anyone who was an authority figure in your childhood, they can affect you. Even older siblings, even your peers at school, all of that can have this negative collective effect and make you believe that something is deeply wrong with you and you need to perform, you need to try harder to be loved, to be accepted. And all your life turns into this turmoil, trying to prove the world that I'm okay, I can be accepted, I can do more, I can be more. And happiness is not about being that perfect person, it's not about the result. Happiness is about two things: feeling connected to others and also having a sense of progress, that you are improving every day, even if it's baby steps. The improvement is the key for your happiness, whether it's in love, in the area of health, area of love relationships, friendships, any area that shows you some improvement can contribute to your happiness. But if you only think that it's a result, I need to become someone to be loved and accepted, I need to become that perfect version of me, that's a rat race that you will never win at. It's a sad, sad reality. And when my clients come to me, I can help them because I've been there. I'm a perfectionist in recovery, and I can honestly say that. And sometimes I still catch myself having that thought that, oh, I need to do this. And then I step back and I ask myself, if a person loved herself, if a woman loved herself, would she say that? Would she do that? If I was Gulnara that loves myself so much, would I do that? So I make my decisions now from the place of self-love versus from the place of I need and I must be perfect. And going back to my marriage, both my ex-husband and I, we were from the families that had high perfectionistic tendencies. And his mother was extreme perfectionists. And also my family members, my aunties who raised me, they were perfectionists, and they were working in a school system, and they would also always focus on fixing children's essays. And I remember my auntie, she would correct everything. And when you correct something at work, you can't focus on other things in life. You always look for something to correct, right? So my mother-in-law was extreme perfectionist. She taught me a lot, and I mentioned about it in my previous podcast, but it did cripple our relationship, and especially my ex-husband, because he was a very intelligent man. He was a kind man and man of integrity, but because they had such high standards upon him, and also he had socially prescribed perfectionism, which is he always gave high significance to his family. And it hurt me as his wife, because every woman's need, I think primary need, is to be accepted and to feel protected by her husband, not because I need protection. I've always been pretty confident, but I moved to a different city. I just lived with his family. I didn't go back to my home probably 3-4 years. So I was totally at the mercy of his family. But I couldn't talk to him about them. So he said, it's taboo. This is how it is, and this is how it is going to be. And I resented him for that. And I know he loved me, but his fear to disappoint his family, his parents, was greater than his responsibility for his nuclear family, which is me and him and our children. And that's what happens when parents impose a lot of standards and they say, well, these are the traditions, these are the rules, this is how it's supposed to be. Then their child is unable to make their own decisions and voice their own opinions, which is not good for marriage. Because in marriage, when you have two people, they need to be able to make decisions, make mistakes, come to some agreements, maybe have some fights, and come to some consensus and grow from it. But if your parents always decide for you, or society or other people interfere or intervene, it's practically impossible to build something lasting in your marriage. And relationship is not something that you just build. Relationship is very dynamic and fluid, and you go back and you test how things work. And especially when you were young partners, and I got married very young, I was 18, and my husband was 20 at that time. Unfortunately, he passed away several years ago, and I feel very bad about the fact that he never learned how to love himself. He never learned how to erase this self-critical voice because eventually he started having drinking issues. And that's what happens with perfectionists, because they have so much pressure on themselves, such unrealistic demands, that this tension cannot be released just by going for a walk. You really have to take some heavy substances. And a lot of mental issues come from traumas, and that's what trauma does to you. It's like that energy that is sitting inside of you and have that negative voice and take your energy out of you every single day, steals your energy. And perfectionism is one of them. And I suffered from it. And one of the ways that helped me to recognize it and learn how to ignore it or manage it is to self-reflect and ask myself these questions. Well, I'm trying to impress these people. Will this matter when I'm in my deathbed, when I'm dying? And some of the existential questions really helped me. And also, maybe in 1 year from now, I will not even remember about this. Why am I trying? And I need to do something. I don't need to procrastinate. I don't need to make it perfect. I don't need to reach that level of perfection that it's going to be so flawless and nobody will say anything. And we, perfectionists, see, I still call myself perfectionist, even though I'm in recovery. I don't even know if we can completely recover from that. We can turn into something good. And in my course about perfectionism, I do talk about adaptive and maladaptive perfectionism. And maladaptive perfectionism is type of perfectionism that is actually can help you to become more successful. So if you want to start something, as my friend said, it's better to have it done than perfect. And she really helped me in my life. Her name is Louisa, and I know her since I was 17. And so how many years is it now? A lot of years we're together. And her light demeanor, her easygoingness really helped me. And I think that's one of the ways to help yourself to be less self-critical, is to surround yourself with people who are light-hearted, kind and positive, and who see goodness in you and who help you see that goodness and wonderful qualities that you possess. I had a friend, and I remember we had a conversation, and once I said, I've become so much more organized, and I was so proud of myself. And even using that language was so foreign to me because I used to criticize myself all the time. And she said, "You organized? No, you just lost your passport a month ago," which I did. I left it on the plane. And she was right. I did lose my passport. I got it back, but I didn't like that reminder because it wasn't kind, it wasn't reassuring, and because she doesn't know my story. Maybe me at that time was much more organized than 2 years ago. So I had my progress, and only I could know my progress. So when you have people who would point out something nice and something great, that would be a very helpful healing component in your healing journey. And when people come for therapy, counseling, training, coaching, and they work on their perfectionistic tendencies and perfectionism in general, I warn them or request not to go back to family members who make them feel less of or not worthy. And I had a client, and he was extremely perfectionist, and he had extremely self-critical thoughts about himself. And I remember after a few sessions, he had a hunting trip with his, not hunting, fishing trip with his father. And he came back and he said, "Oh my God, I think I haven't learned anything because my father reminded me of the fact that I have to be perfect for him to accept me." So when we go back and spend time with family members and caregivers who actually made us feel completely flawed and imperfect, they can re-traumatize us and open the wound. So I recommend when you are taking on this journey to heal yourself, it's better to maybe eliminate or reduce the time, the duration of your time spent with these people so that you can learn something from the course. If you decide to take my course online, I will leave the link down below. And you take this course, there are some tests after each segment, and then try to stay with this information and do some exercises. And don't go back and spend time with people who would reopen these wounds. Just help this information, this knowledge get solidified and reinforced in your nervous system. Yeah. So that was my short podcast about perfectionism. And I want you to know that you are perfect enough to be loved. And as Rumi said, what you are seeking is seeking you. Your love partner is out there looking for someone just like you. And you just need to let this belief set in and take it in and believe it. And it will affect your energy. It affects your mood, your demeanor, your state of vibrations, and you will show up in life without any blocks, without any excuses, and unapologetically you will say, "Yes, I am perfect with all of my imperfections and I deserve love." So this course is about maybe a couple of hours. I spent a few months writing a script and preparing exercises, and I use a lot of research there. So hopefully you'll enjoy it. And when we get better, your life gets better. And I hope this course on how to overcome perfectionism will help you to get better, to feel better, and to make your life better. Thank you so much for joining me in my podcast. And please let me know in your comments what other topics you would like me to cover. And I would be happy to do that for you, or what kind of guests you would like me to invite. Thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful day. And remember, you are perfect with all of your imperfections.